The Trump trade wars have just begun, and we're at the beginning of a global monetary reset.
With the president in the Oval Office, and I can confirm that tomorrow, the February 1st deadline that President Trump put into place at a statement several weeks ago continues. The president will be implementing tomorrow a 25% tariffs on Mexico, 25% tariffs on Canada, and a 10% tariff on China for the illegal fentanyl that they have sourced and allowed to distribute into our country, which has killed tens of millions of Americans. These are promises made and promises kept by the president.
As a result, we probably just experienced the craziest 48 hours in Bitcoin in geopolitical history. Starting Sunday, the crypto market experienced the largest 24-hour liquidation event since COVID and FTX. The people who sold yesterday got wrecked and learned a very hard lesson. Never sell your Bitcoin.
It is preposterous for one to sit there and rationalize selling their Bitcoin because of tariffs.
Fear forced people to sell a generational asset in a moment that's designed to protect them for a lifetime. But in less than 48 hours after Trump started the trade war, Canada and Mexico both reached deals with the United States. And Bitcoiners who've been around long enough knew exactly what to do and bought the dip. Bitcoin saw its first 10K day in its history, or some heathens call it the God candle. And with the 10K candle out of the way, the question is, when will we see an Omega candle?
I don't think tariffs will work.
No,
I don't think they'll work. They just pass the cost off to American consumers. So, who pays for tariffs? It's not, like people just won't sell to the U.S. It'll damage the trade on our GDP because we can't sell.
Samson Mao made this prediction back in December. And the day where the United States government will kick off a global buying spree is closer than you think. Donald Trump signed an executive order to create a sovereign wealth fund with Scott Bessent and Howard Lutnick, two Bitcoiners. Do you remember when Howard Lutnick said this?
I have hundreds of millions of dollars.
Okay.
Hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars exposure to Bitcoin.
And you still aren't bullish about Bitcoin? Today we break down the panic in the market, the fear, and why Trump tariffs are actually bullish for Bitcoin as we enter into a global monetary reset. This is Dante Cook with Bitcoin Simply. Let's go. Yesterday just kicked off the beginnings of a global monetary reset.
We may have short-term a little pain, and people understand that, but long-term, the United States has been ripped off by virtually every country in the world. We have deficits with almost every country, not every country, but almost. And we're going to change it. It's been unfair. That's why we owe $36 trillion. We have deficits with everybody. We help everybody. We've been helping everybody for years. And to be honest, I don't think they appreciate it. So we're going to change that. We're going to change it fast. We're going to make America great again. We have to focus on our country. We have tremendous potential if properly used, and we have to focus on our country. Tremendous deficits with China, tremendous deficits with the European Union, tremendous deficits with Mexico and Canada. And why? What's the purpose of that? Why would we have deficits? And you look at, if you look at pharmaceuticals and drugs, if you look at various products, it's much cheaper in other countries. We're not going to allow that much longer. We're not going to take it.
Everyone who sees a Trump tariff headline and makes a claim that Donald Trump is just a bully or a dictator don't know what's actually going on. The U.S. is in a pickle that it's put itself in over the last 50 years. The U.S. dollar, for all of its power, has some downsides. As the global reserve currency, the rest of the world needs dollars, which means that the dollar is overvalued. And this makes the U.S. run huge trade deficits in order to propagate the dollar to other places in the world. And the only way to keep this game going is that it needs to continually borrow money and have others borrow money in its currency, which is why we have $36 trillion in debt and run major deficits with almost every other major country in the world. This entire ploy is just a tactic in order to devalue the dollar and stimulate growth and economic interest in the United States, potentially lowering interest rates. And we've done this before.
Twice in the last 80 years. We're just about due. We did it in 1933. FDR came out and was like, surprise, dollar used to buy you $20 an ounce. Now it's 35. Have a good day. And oh, by the way, we're confiscating all your gold.
That's, the gold confiscation. Okay.
That was a dollar devaluation. The next dollar devaluation happened in 71. Nixon said, surprise.
Gold again.
And I think there's a really good chance we see some sort of Sunday night surprise in the first half of 25. And I don't know exactly what it looks like. I'll know when I see it. But I think the symptoms of that are a lot of what we've seen, which will be over some brief period of time, we will see gold skyrocket. We will see Bitcoin skyrocket. We will see stocks skyrocket. You'll probably see some sort of soft regulations to sort of make somebody new try to buy treasuries and finance deficits. But ultimately, the devaluation will drive growth and inflation enough that your deficit shrinks. That's the only way to shrink the deficit is devalue the dollar and debt.
Jeff Park, the head of strategy at Bitwise, highlighted this beautifully in a memo that he posted on X. Trump is going to try to lower interest rates, weaken the dollar, and drive growth and interest in U.S. equities and stocks, which is all bullish for Bitcoin. So now, hopefully you know what actually is going on underneath of the surface when you read about a Trump tariff. The biggest beneficiary of all of this is going to be Bitcoin, the great absorber of liquidity. When everyone else in the world is looking for a store of value, they're going to turn to the best store of value for the 21st century. You're going to see this for a few reasons. Reason number one, people are losing trust in government and need something and someone to trust in. Point in case number one. Remember when the United States sent $177 billion to Ukraine? Well, President Zelensky of Ukraine said that they just received about $75 billion. So where did the other $100 billion go? You don't just lose $100 billion. Some people might call that money laundering. And that's exactly what Elon Musk called it when talking about getting rid of unnecessary spending in the government with this new Department of Government Efficiency program. In just a few weeks in office, they've eliminated over 100 contracts and returned almost $1.2 billion back to United States taxpayers. The United States administration is looking to take down other corrupt shadow organizations in the government, like the USAID. And there's rumors that we're going to see major drastic changes to other departments like the Department of Education as well.
To my friends who are upset, I would say with respect, call somebody who cares. They better get used to this. It's USAID today. It's going to be Department of Education tomorrow.
And that's because the inefficiency and the corruption go all the way to the top. In a news story that was sort of buried and hasn't made major headlines, a senior economic advisor to the Federal Reserve, John Rogers, has been indicted and implicated in a series of espionage acts against the United States with our foreign adversary, China. This is the person who is advising 12 people who set the base rate for money globally. Trust is a fundamental core tenet of why governments and money work in the first place. Here's a clip from 25 years ago that Pete Rizzo found of Michael Saylor talking about this very exact thing.
Trust. Trust is the core issue. You have to trust this deposit of information. And I would say that trust is central to the development of our entire Western civilization for the past 2,000 years. Now, if we roll the clock back, I would offer as a metaphor the bank. What is a bank? A bank stores information that people have about their personal wealth holdings. In order for a bank to work, we need to trust the banking system. And the way we do it is the government defines a currency. I can sell my pig and you can sell your land and she can sell her seed corn for money into a market. I get the money back and I have to trust the currency because if I sell my pig for $10 and I got to buy it back for $100 next week, I'm not going to trust the markets. That's why inflation kills the banking system. If I do have a government that has a stable currency, then I can trade all my assets for money. Money is information. I can put the money into a bank, and the banker is a database guy holding a ledger of everybody's name and their money and protecting their interest. Now along comes a guy that has a lot more time than he has money. He wants to start a farm, so he borrows money, flips a note back, takes the money, buys land, gets pigs, gets some seed corn, plants, creates the farm, sells that stuff in the open market, pays off the interest to the bank. The banker passes back that interest to the depositor. Everybody with assets gets interest. Everybody without assets gets a loan.
Reason number two why Bitcoin is poised to benefit. It's a trustless digital money and property that you can verify for yourself. Last week, the Department of Justice, in a bombshell case, claimed that they can seize your money because your money is not property. In a legal battle with the Department of Justice, Chuck Sane, the owner of CS Lawn Care and Landscaping, a small landscaping business outside of Annapolis, Maryland, was told that the government had the right to not only seize his $50,000, but he didn't have the right to contest this in front of a judge and a jury. If your money is not property, what's to stop the government from seizing it all tomorrow? And this is why we Bitcoin. This is why Bitcoin is not only the best form of money, but digital property that you can take custody of and verify for yourself. Which leads us to our sponsors. Our first sponsor is Ledin, the leader in Bitcoin lending. Since 2018, they've processed tens of thousands of loans for over $6.5 billion to Bitcoiners all over the world and have not lost a single cent or sat of customers' money. You can verify this for yourself with their customer reviews. You can also verify that they actually have the Bitcoin that they say they do because they are the first digital lender to do a proof of reserves. You can find the proof of reserves on their website. Ledin was created so that you can unlock liquidity in your Bitcoin without selling your Bitcoin. You can fill out an application at ledin.io/borrowing, and it'll take you just 2 minutes, and you'll receive currency in your local jurisdiction in dollars or another currency in less than 24 hours. That's ledin.io/borrowing. Speaking of perfect money and the ability to verify your property for yourself, well, that's possible with Bitcoin, but only if you remove Bitcoin from exchanges and take self-custody of your Bitcoin. And there's no better people to help you do that and do that the right way than our partners at thebitcoinway.com. Members of their team will walk you through proper 100% self-custody to ensure that you own your property and that the government cannot confiscate it. They will help you to take self-custody, do it privately, securely, and confidently. Head to thebitcoinway.com/simplybitcoin to schedule a free 30-minute consultation with their team. That's thebitcoinway.com/simplybitcoin. The gold market is already calling bluff and seizing their property for themselves, as the U.S. Commodity Exchange had over 40,000 deliveries of gold in February in just 3 days when it had 22,000 in January for the entire month, which was already a heavy volume of flow. There seems to be a global frenzy going on that people know that something is up in the markets. And that's not just for gold. That's also for Bitcoin, and why Bitcoin had a 10K candle day yesterday. Reason number 3 to be bullish about Bitcoin in light of tariffs and a global monetary reset. Bitcoin is the asset best positioned to benefit from the collapse in fiat currencies, the debt debasement and devaluing of the dollar that the United States will be partaking on in the upcoming year. And it is the asset that Lynn Alden and Sam Callahan say is best positioned to take advantage of all of these forces coming into one. Here's a great clip from Walker's podcast. Check it out.
When I look at Bitcoin, it's like that's the purpose of Bitcoin. I mean, we talked about this on our last show. Bitcoin's like a mirror for these reckless government spending programs, and its monetary properties kind of allow it to do that, given its scarcity and its fixed supply and all these things that allows it to be really tied and correlated to the liquidity. And so I just think, and given how young it is and how it's still growing and it's still early in its adoption cycle, that's why there's so much potential opportunity, because not only do I feel like it's kind of built for these times and the value proposition is very strong, it's also very young. And so that allows it to have significant potential price appreciation as adoption continues to grow all around the globe. Because, I mean, we mentioned the U.S. a lot, but the U.S. is like in a better position than all these other countries around the world. And so Bitcoin is needed even more so in these emerging markets with even more unstable fiscal situations and currencies. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously I'm bullish on Bitcoin, but I really think that it's kind of it's made for the times or something.
Yeah, it's good for turning money.
For turning money.
Yeah, I think obviously there are multiple assets that can benefit. Bitcoin, I think we would generally agree is like the best way to do it, because you get the absolute scarcity mixed with the fact that it's a young asset. If it was just looking at relative scarcity, we would say, okay, gold's growing by 1.5% a year, Bitcoin's growing at less than 1%, and long-term grows at 0. So should we expect Bitcoin to outperform gold by 1% a year? No, because we have a total addressable market in mind for what Bitcoin could be, or at least a range. And we think that a $2 trillion market cap is so small relative to what it could reach. So in addition to merely protecting against debasement, which is kind of what gold's doing, it's actually growing into whatever it's going to become.
On top of all this, we have Howard Lutnick, the new leader of the Sovereign Wealth Fund that the United States just signed into executive order yesterday, saying this at the Bitcoin conference in Nashville last year.
Cantor Fitzgerald and all of its partners are a fan of Bitcoin. Does Cantor Fitzgerald own Bitcoin? A shed load of Bitcoin. My view is Bitcoin, like gold, should be free to trade everywhere in the world. And as the largest wholesaler in the world, we are going to do everything in our power to make it so. Bitcoin is the same as gold, and Bitcoin should trade the same as gold everywhere in the world without exception and without limitation.
As you saw earlier in the episode, he owns hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of Bitcoin. And Cantor Fitzgerald also owns a major stake in Tether, which mints the USDT stablecoin, which is one of the largest buyers of US treasuries in the world. If you don't see what's happening, then you're not paying attention. Also, day by day, we have more corporations, institutions, and states getting into the Bitcoin race. Real people are experiencing the cost of inflation, not the inflation that the government reports, but real inflation in the real world, and are waking up to the reality that their money and their wealth needs to outpace this in order for them to survive.
That's the cost of living crisis. Suddenly, we went up from prices being around there to prices being there. And you don't really see that in this data, okay? Because inflation is really just measuring the difference between that and that. And if you look at those two lines, you're talking about a 2.3% change. That's the number we're talking about today. But for a lot of people, it's not about that. It's about the difference between this and that. And when you look at the difference between this and that, that's 20%. And I think that's the dichotomy here between these inflation numbers where it looks normal and this, which is really not normal at all.
All of these things combine into one to bring us to one of the most bullish macro setups for Bitcoin in its history. Don't overthink the trade just because you see Trump tariffs and you see some turbulation in the short term. This is a global monetary reset that's going to play out over the next months and years. And Bitcoin is the best asset to help you benefit from these things going on. If you find these shows informative, educational, or entertaining, I encourage you to share them with a friend or a loved one and subscribe to the channel. This is Dante Cook with Bitcoin Simply. Happy stacking.